So I'd asked you, Josie, what's something you wanted to talk about here tonight on Free Talk Live, and you did bring up the Kent State sweatshirt or sweater issue.
Yeah, the controversy of, I think it was yesterday, that was the big controversy.
I saw
on Facebook?
Yeah, I mean, all over the news. It was on the news. Not mainstream. I guess RT is the most
I heard
mainstream.
it on the mainstream news this morning. I heard, I think it was CBS News talking about it. They played some kind of statement, and I've actually got a statement here from Urban Outfitters. So to bring you up to speed, so my understanding of the story is that all of a sudden on the shelves at Urban Outfitters is this sweatshirt, Kent State, just sort of like college students everywhere have their college name on their sweater. So not unusual to see something like that. But what was unusual is that it appeared to be a blood-stained sweatshirt.
Yeah, it has that look to it.
Yeah.
It has bullet holes in it.
Does it have holes too?
It has holes in it.
Okay.
And the
what, too soon?
The explanation I'd seen for this, or that I heard for this, was ridiculous, claiming that the holes came from wear and tear or something like that, and that it wasn't blood, it was just
tie-dye-ish,
some sort of coloring.
Sunspot. They said something with sunspot. I forget exactly what they said.
It was the lamest excuse I'd ever heard. But here's a story from Time Magazine. They wrote about the latest controversy to hit Urban Outfitters. This Kent State sweatshirt vintage that appeared to have bloodstains on it, an apparent reference to the shooting deaths of 4 students by National Guardsmen that took place during a May 1970 protest on the Ohio campus. I mean, this is an infamous event, but maybe it's not so infamous. Maybe the buyer at Urban Outfitters had no idea what he or she was actually looking at, and they just thought it was a cool design for a sweatshirt.
I think that Kent State is, that shooting is so wrapped up in that even people who don't know anything about what happened still associate Kent State with a shooting, and they're not sure exactly what.
I don't know. I mean, I look at some of the. I remember watching like jaywalking on Jay Leno when I was younger, and it's amazing what people just don't know and don't pay attention to.
It's true.
So I can see, especially a lot of the younger generation, just picking it up and being like, "Oh, this looks cool." But what I liked about the story coming out was that imagine how many times Kent State was Googled.
That's true. And I think that's an interesting look at this because there's a lot of outrage about this move by Urban Outfitters, and it has certainly started conversations. And people who didn't know, because certainly there are people in their 20s, for instance, or teens that have no idea what Kent State was. I don't imagine it's covered at all, if very heavily, in government school history classes. So maybe this has really, unintentionally on Urban Outfitters' part, has really brought the Kent State story where government troops shot students, peaceful students. And didn't it come out recently something about that there was an agent provocateur?
Yeah, as I understand it, there was an NPR report I heard, and I think it was last year, was like the 30th anniversary or something like that. And they've discovered that it was actually government agent provocateurs in the crowd that began throwing the stones that caused the National Guard to begin shooting at the students. And for some reason, it doesn't seem to matter to anyone because I guess it's been so long, right? Oh, well, all the people who made the decision, all the people who made these decisions are dead now. I guess there's nothing we can do about it. But this goes on all the time. It's not just our government. It's every government. This is what they do.
We just experienced that over the weekend in New York City at the rallies for the 9/11, the 9/11 protest and 9/11 Truth. There was
you experienced agent provocateurs?
What seemed to be a very aggressive agent provocateur. She was screaming, really aggressively, first at the police about how the police were protecting, Bush and this and that, and why they weren't protecting us. And at first I'm like, oh, she's just passionate and that's fine. But anyone who would, try to get any attention, she would scream at and, obscenities and slang. And, it was not good.
We'll come back with more here in moments, whether you want to talk about agents provocateur or the Kent State sweatshirt controversy. I've got the actual statement here from Urban Outfitters. We'll read that on the way. And we would love to hear what you think about this Urban Outfitters sweatshirt controversy that is quite the topic, from what I understand. I'm hearing it on mainstream media. Time Magazine here has the official statement from Urban Outfitters. You tell me if you believe them. Because apparently this isn't the first time that Urban Outfitters has been involved in some sort of clothing controversy. So here's the official statement, quote, Urban Outfitters, and for those of you that don't know, this is about a Kent State t-shirt or a Kent State sweater that apparently was bloody or appeared bloody, had what appeared to be holes in it, perhaps bullet holes was the suggestion. And I was wrong. When I said this was appearing on store shelves, I jumped to that conclusion figuring that's how clothing stores work. Apparently, Urban Outfitters has what they call their vintage collection. The vintage finds, and they were selling this shirt for $129. Some sort of shirt that they found at a yard sale, basically at the flea market. They found this at a flea market, so they claim, and they put it on their website. There's only one of them, so they were not appearing on store shelves. There was only one appearing on their website, and that is what caused somebody saw it, so it got posted online and spread virally. So here's their response. Quote, Urban Outfitters would like to extend our sincerest apologies to Kent State University and the Kent State community. We're deeply saddened by the recent uproar our vintage Kent State sweatshirt has caused. Though it was never our intention to offend anyone, we understand how the item could have been perceived negatively. The tragic events that took place in 1970 are not forgotten, and our company regrets that people believe we would intentionally make light of such a horrific part of our nation's history.
I don't know, though. I mean, I don't know if this is making light necessarily. This T-shirt is art, and it's a single piece of art. But if you you can mass produce art.
Sure.
And it says whatever it says to you. You know, I mean, this could mean I celebrate the shooting of students at Kent State. Yay! Funny, funny.
It could mean that art has all kinds of different interpretations.
Or it says, I'd like to bring to your attention the slaughter of our students by our government.
It's a conversation starter, that's for sure.
Whatever it says is what it says to the person who made it, the person who wore it, and the person who sees it. And I don't know I guess that's why it's a news story, but it seems kind of funny that a single sweatshirt is making a big splash.
Well, it certainly appeared to, as it did to Ian, and I'm sure a lot of us, that this is something that they're selling. If it's appearing on a website of a national chain, then you would assume that there's more than one. Most would. What I don't understand is how this got through, whatever necessary steps to make it onto the shelf without anyone possibly bringing up the possible implications that this sweatshirt, it brings up.
Yeah, I don't know either. And well, in this case, it's not on the shelf, right? It's on the virtual shelf.
Right.
It was just their website that features this. And what I'm shocked at is that somebody might probably pay $129 for what is essentially a yard sale item, and that Urban Outfitters is able to go to a flea market, pluck some crappy, tattered old sweater off the shelves there at the flea market, and then resell it for $129 is just an amazing testimony to. I mean, I'm presuming they sell crap like this all the time. Again, they have this.
Right, that's not the only one.
This vintage finds collection, which are these supposed one-offs that they're finding out there in the world. This is a junk sweater, and so why you would have something like this is just bizarre to me. I guess tears are in.
Hipster. Oh yeah, the hipsters, man, that's in.
So, and I guess looking like you've been shot at Kent State could be in as far as hipsters
Very
are concerned
trendy
as well.
nowadays.
Halloween's coming up.
To promote such an event, they say in this is continuing with their little statement, is disgraceful, insensitive, and in poor taste. To further clarify, despite what has been reported, this is a vintage item and there is only one. Once the negative feedback was brought to our attention, we removed the item immediately from sale. Urban Outfitters purchased the one-of-a-kind sweatshirt from the Rose Bowl Flea Market as part of our sun-faded vintage collection. There's no blood on the sweatshirt, nor did we ever promote it as such. The discoloration that has been mistaken for blood is from natural fading and sun exposure. Now, that sounds totally unbelievable. This sweater, this picture of the sweater, unless I'm expected to believe that the dark red splotch on the sweater is in point of fact the original color of the sweater, and that the rest of the sweater has been sun faded away from dark red to a light pink to white kind of color. I don't believe that for a moment.
I don't believe that at all.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Somebody made this as a piece of art, and that's what it is.
I think that's the case, but here's what my question is because usually when you have buyers, and this is going to be the lowest level of buyer, right? This is a person who goes out and combs flea markets for finds for Urban Outfitters, and they're selling this at $120. So I don't know how many pieces of clothing you can grab in an hour that make that you can sell at $100+ to pay this person's paycheck, because it's going to be a lot more than what they make. But I would think that this is a very low level position. This is an intern starting sort of position.
Yeah, but the person who's going to the flea market, is that the same person who's actually listing it on their website? Surely this went through more than one pair of hands in a big company like
Really?
Urban
I wouldn't
Outfitters.
think so. I would think that if this is your job, list it up here, and we want this to touch as few hands as possible, or whatever.
Could be.
I could be wrong, but it seems to me that when you're talking about buyers, generally you're talking about young women, and clothing buyers. And
You think so?
Well, I'm just looking at the numbers.
I
man.
think in fashion, they're pretty stringent as to what they want to go with the trends, and especially Urban Outfitters, because they have a very specific demographic that they're catering to, and it's the younger
Is it
crowd.
male or female?
It's male and female, but
Okay.
it's definitely younger. It's college age, high school, college age.
Okay.
25,000, by the way, is how many employees Urban Outfitters has globally. So maybe you're right, Mark. Maybe it's just this one person who's responsible for this, but I don't think so. And I don't believe the story that it was found at a flea market either.
Well, I don't know about that.
The toll-free number, if it was found there, it was put there as a piece of art. I'm not claiming it's actual blood, but it definitely was intended to look like blood. This is not some random sun fading. More coming up. Free Talk Live. We're kind of looking at this Urban Outfitters story and actually have their official statement about this sweatshirt, or the sweater that has the Kent State logo on it and also appears to be stained with blood. It also apparently appears to have holes in it. I didn't get a high-resolution version of this, the picture of the sweater, so I haven't seen the actual bullet holes in it yet. Josie, you've seen it close enough?
I have not. I have just read what other people posted about seeing the bullet holes.
So that's also what I've heard, and they're claiming that the red is not blood. They're claiming that it was natural fading and sun exposure. This sounds totally like BS to me, because if you actually look at the picture, you don't need a high-resolution photo to be able to tell. There's dark red spots on this thing, and it looks very much like blood. Whether or not it actually is another question. I don't suspect that it is. I think this is, as we were discussing before, a piece of artwork. And like a good piece of artwork, it can be interpreted in different ways. When you look at a piece of art, whether it's something that's static or it's a movie or something like that, everybody has their own preconceptions and ideas and beliefs that they bring into seeing a piece of art, and so therefore good artwork can make people feel differently, and that you may not get the same message as what the original artist was trying to intend. So maybe the artist was trying to maybe the intention was to get a conversation started about Kent State and the massacre of the students there on behalf of the federal government. Maybe that was it. Or maybe the artist is somebody who just thinks it's funny to put out a bloodstained sweatshirt, or ironic or something like that. I don't know what their intentions were, and Urban Outfitters certainly isn't going to identify the artist if they know who it is. Their claim is that one of their buyers for their so-called vintage collection, or the vintage finds, they claim the buyer was at some flea market, the Rose Bowl flea market, and just found it there. And then they put it up on the website asking for $129 for this thing. Let me finish up their statement here. They claim that, again, it was sun exposure and natural fading that was mistaken for blood. With all of that said, they say this truth does not excuse us from our failure to identify potential controversial products head-on. We, as a company who cater to a college-age demographic, have a responsibility to uphold to our customers. Given our history of controversial issues, we understand how our sincerity may be questioned. We can only prove our commitment to improving our product screening process through our actions and by holding ourselves accountable. Again, we sincerely apologize for this unfortunate misunderstanding and are dedicated to perfecting our internal processes to help avoid these issues in the future.
I just don't see a problem with it. It's art, and yeah, I mean, what are people need to articulate what it is that upsets them? Is it that Urban Outfitters is making money by selling something that profits off the death of these kids, or that it shows the government in a bad light? I need to know what the information is, and sort of, so I can say it.
Or is it just upsetting that they brought this to the forefront?
I know it's difficult. At first, when I first saw it, I know what happened at Kent State, so my initial reaction was just I was sick. I was like, oh, these poor people, and so that was my initial reaction. But I guess that's supposed to be your reaction when you come across or when you're reminded of such a horrific event.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, I think about it, and that's something I would do in protest or to bring, to start a conversation. So
you did something involving blood, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, just a couple weeks ago, and I just poured a bucket of blood over my head, to talk about.
It was Chris Campbell that poured it on you, right?
Yeah, it was. Yes, it was Chris that poured the bucket, and it wasn't real blood.
He seemed to really be enjoying that, by the way.
He was, and everyone kept asking me if it was real blood. No, it was not real blood. It was stage blood. But it started a conversation and it got a lot of people talking. So it's not something that I
thought it was a great video, by the way. Now, where could someone go to see the video of which you're speaking, in case they haven't done so?
That would be the Brutalist Media TV.
Brutalist Media TV.
That's the
YouTube
channel.
YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's
only a couple of new videos up there.
Yeah, there's
right?
only two. It's called like a white T-shirt ice bucket challenge.
Brutalist Media TV. I thought it was great. It really, you guys were obviously using this ALS ice bucket challenge, fervor, if you will, and riffing on that at the same time, bringing attention to a lot of different issues. There's this hard-hitting, kind of fast-cutting section in that video where you guys ask some really tough, poignant questions, and it kind of throws it in people's faces who might not have really been expecting it. It's a shocker, and I think it's in a good way.
Thanks. We had fun making it.
Yeah, and how hard was it to get the fake blood out of your hair?
Really, really hard. I took a couple showers.
Was it sugary, like a sugary kind of mix?
No, it was. I tried to do that. I came up. I couldn't make it in the amount that I needed, but I had to buy it. I just purchased stage blood, so it stained my hands and my feet for like a week. Yeah, but yeah, my hair. It took like a couple washings to get all of it out.
Ugh. Now, how much did you have to buy? Because it seemed like a fair amount.
It was a gallon. That was only a gallon, but it was like $30.
Where do you get it? I mean, did you go online?
I just went to Party City.
Oh, really?
I just drove right.
A gallon of fake
That's
blood?
what I asked. I thought they would probably only have, one of those
little bottles
of it, but I went back and they had just buckets of it. And I'm
wow.
like, what are people using this for in the middle of summer in New Hampshire? This is insane.
Weird. Good stories. All right, so a little bit more about Urban Outfitters here. We finished up their statement, but Time Magazine actually, and good for Time for kind of recapping this, they actually posted a brief article, which is, well, why is it that the Urban Outfitters Kent State sweatshirt is causing an uproar? For those who aren't really aware of what happened, this is their version of the story. So it took half a century to transform Kent State from an obscure teacher's college into the second largest university in Ohio. With 21,000 students and an impressive array of modern buildings on its main campus, Time reported shortly after the shooting. But it took less than 10 terrifying seconds last week to convert the traditionally conformist campus into a bloodstained symbol of the rising student rebellion against the Nixon administration and the war in Southeast Asia. So this is way back when there was actually an anti-war movement in this country, when National Guardsmen fired indiscriminately into a crowd of unarmed civilians, killing 4 students. The bullets wounded the nation, wrote Time back in 1970. Now, back to today, over at Time.com. On the night of May 1st, as students at The Ohio University danced in the street, an unlucky driver attempted to get through the crowd. The mood in the country amid a wave of student protests over the Vietnam War was tense, and the confrontation over a traffic jam quickly became more serious. As students in the crowd chanted anti-war chants, the police used tear gas to get the students back to campus, but the conflict was still fresh when the administration-approved rally began the next day. A Saturday, the protests turned violent, and the local mayor requested help from the National Guard. On Sunday, Ohio Governor James Rhodes said the student protesters were, quote, the worst type of people that we harbor in America. We'll come back with more of what happened at Kent State. Your calls and thoughts are welcome if you want to reflect. Maybe you were around back then. I was not. This is Free Talk Live. All right, so back to the story here, a little bit more from Time Magazine. This isn't really in-depth or anything like that. Obviously, you can go and do more research on this, but just sort of painting the picture of what things were like there over this particular, there's a weekend here. So there were protests on a Saturday on Kent State back in 1970s in early May. And then they continued on through to the following Sunday when Ohio Governor James Rhodes said the student protesters were, quote, the worst type of people that we harbor in America, unquote. And despite requests to close the campus, declared a state of emergency instead. When nearly 1,000 students staged a sit-in that night, it was against his order banning all protests. So some really amazing level of activism going on.
I don't think
Yeah.
they were respecting his authority.
No, and good for him, good for them. And normally this is a relatively peaceful thing. The protesters are likely very, very peaceful people, but as we discussed earlier, there's always the chance that some agent provocateur is going to get involved. And an agent provocateur is someone who works for the government. They work for the police or the National Guard in this case, perhaps, and they dress as though they are a protester, show up amongst the protesters, and then attempt to do things that might get the protesters in trouble or possibly gin up some violence that otherwise wouldn't have happened. Get out there and start talking about violence, encouraging other people to engage in violence, therefore giving the police, or in this case the National Guard, an excuse to crush some heads.
And it may not even be an excuse. That's the assumption that that the National Guard even knew what was going on. Consider for a second that it wouldn't take too many shadowy figures to get this going, because your average National Guard guy isn't probably going to be down to just firing on some students who didn't do anything just because an agent of provocateur's involved. But if the average National Guard guy has a few rocks hit him in his upper body, he might then be ready to start shooting students, and it wouldn't matter which ones.
So about 1,000 assembled on campus on Monday. Even though classes had started again as normal, the protest was rankling students, and 1,000 of them assembled on campus, flaunting the ban and prompting the National Guard to respond with tear gas. Some students picked up the canisters and threw them back to the student demonstrators. Taunting the guardsmen was a more serious...
See, that's not acceptable. You're not allowed to take the tear gas canisters and throw them back at the people that threw them at you. I mean, what kind of citizen does this? You are a servile serf. You will bow before the king's men.
Delighted, let's see. So, to the student demonstrators, taunting the guardsmen was a more serious game of catch. Another excerpt from Time when they reported in 1970, delighted spectators watching from the hilltop, windows of buildings, and the roof of another men's dorm cheered. Many demonstrators were laughing at the throwing back of the tear gas. But then the tear gas ran out. The guardsmen retreated to the top of a hill, watching the crowd, and they fired. The protest, noisy and chaotic, stopped. 4 students were dead. William K. Schroeder, 19, had been a spectator. Sandra Lee Schur, age 20, had been walking to class. Jeffrey Glenn Miller, 20, had called his mother to let her know that he had felt he had to take part in the protests. Allison Krause, age 19, had recently placed a flower in the rifle of a guardsman at the protest. 10 others were wounded. The deaths of Kent State students inspired another wave of student protests across the country, as well as Neil Young's song, Ohio. Then they link over to the original report, actually, from May of 1970 on the Kent State shootings. I'll link to this story, and then you can dig in further on our Facebook, Google+, and Twitter. You can access all of those over at news.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.